Hi everyone, welcome back. The weekend saw one of the world's best defenders, Virgil van Dijk, suffer a potentially season-ending injury and deliver a hammer blow to Liverpool's campaign. So where do they go from here? We will discuss that on the show. You can currently subscribe to The Athletic for just £1 or $1 per month, and after adding Alan Shearer to our list of columnists, our lineup is getting stronger and stronger. You can also check out, among other things, my interview with Arsene Wenger, where he speaks openly about his Arsenal career, the highlights and his regrets. On this week's show, whether Liverpool will look to sign a Van Dijk replacement in January, why Jordan Pickford won't be punished retrospectively for his challenge, and some quickfire questions from our Athletic subscribers. Well, it's important to begin by acknowledging the severity of this injury and wish Virgil van Dijk all the very best in his recovery. I also think we have a responsibility as journalists, fans, people inside or outside the game, when it comes to our language, approach, behaviour, conduct in this particular situation, and especially towards the match officials, the VAR David Coote, the Everton goalkeeper Jordan Pickford. Some of the reaction, in my view, has crossed a line. I'm not here to be an apologist for anyone, but we need to remember that whatever side of the fence we might sit on, there are human beings involved. In terms of the injury itself, it's my understanding, and I stress that's just my information, it's not official, that the damage to Virgil van Dijk's right knee is perhaps worse than initially feared and extends beyond the ACL. Now, I'm no medical expert, so it's unfair to speculate further or give greater detail, but I did want to pass it on, and it would indicate that we won't see Van Dijk back on a pitch until next season. He will now undergo surgery. Exactly when, we don't know. That's a decision for Van Dijk and those around him. But through Liverpool and the Dutch national team, they'll have access to some of the best medics in the world, plenty of options, and I'm sure he's in perfectly good hands. The big question is how Liverpool react, with many eyes already focused on the January transfer window. As far as I know, that level of conversation is yet to take place internally. They won't make a snap call on the matter. They're not ruling out a January signing, but as things stand, I don't sense it's likely. January is always a tricky market. Prices are high, availability low. We don't know what finances Liverpool would have at their disposal. A player coming in would need time to adapt. They also wouldn't just have to be at Liverpool's level, they'd need to be an improvement on what the club already have. Liverpool aren't normally a checkbook club in this sense. They don't tend to throw money at these sorts of problems. Yes, they signed Van Dijk himself and Alisson for big money, but we'd all agree that they were needed and it was money extremely well spent. From what I hear, Jurgen Klopp would prefer to rely on internal resources in this case. The ability of he and his staff to coach players up to the required level. So the likes of Joel Matip and Joe Gomez, okay, they've not started at centre-back in a Premier League game before, and Matip completed 90 minutes in the Premier League at Everton on Saturday for the first time in a year, but they are quality performers. If something was to happen to them in terms of form or fitness, or indeed Liverpool's domestic or European campaign, then perhaps the owners would turn around and say, okay, go and sign a top talent like Deo Upamecano. I'm not saying Liverpool are in for Upamecano, I'm just giving an example of one of Europe's leading centre-backs. He could bring Fabinho back into that position if needed. He's played well there before. And although that would detract from Liverpool's midfield, they did bring Thiago Alcantara in the summer and retained Gini Wijnaldum, so they're already stronger in that department. Then there are younger players, the likes of Phillips, Cometio, Williams, Van den Berg. I don't think Klopp would be afraid to give them opportunities to fast-track their progress, to give them chances they wouldn't have had if Van Dijk had been fit and available, even to an extent if it's at the expense of results. In this season of all seasons, every club is going to lose games, and so it may be deemed a price worth paying. People will ask, is this Liverpool's Aymeric Laporte moment following his injury for Manchester City last season, and then they lost the title to Liverpool? Well, on that front, only time will tell. Liverpool's anger around this episode has of course been focused on the Pickford challenge rather than him personally, although I do detect an element of frustration at a perceived lack of contrition. However, it's more targeted at the Premier League and what the club feel to be contradictory messages that they were told after the game by a senior Premier League official that the VAR, David Coote, had not reviewed the challenge on Virgil van Dijk for a potential red card, only subsequently to hear from referees boss Mike Riley saying that Mr. Coote did review the incident for a potential red card, and that has led to confusion reigning. Liverpool want the Premier League to communicate better with them and the public and say that it's only Liverpool themselves who have been communicating in this matter, so they're desperate for some clarity. It has been reported that David Coote forgot the rules, that he didn't remember he could send Pickford off after ruling Van Dijk offside. The Premier League say this is completely untrue, that he didn't forget anything, merely that he did not deem the challenge on Van Dijk worthy of a red card. The chronology is, according to the Premier League, that Mr. Coote checked for the penalty, probably deemed it worthy of a penalty and a yellow card, then went to check for the offside, ruled Van Dijk offside, and so that superseded the penalty and yellow card. He then said, check complete. What he should have done was told the on-field referee, Michael Oliver, to go and have a look for himself on the monitor. It's said that David Coote has received a barrage of abuse, and we also understand that he has held conversations with his bosses about the decisions. There's no getting away from the fact that he made a mistake. He should have awarded a red card. From the FA's perspective, there can be no retrospective punishment for Jordan Pickford because their policy is that they can only award retrospective disciplinary action for red card incidents that were not seen at the time, and this was seen at the time. I think everyone will want to put this sorry episode behind them and wish Virgil van Dijk a speedy recovery. To your quickfire questions, and Daniel asks, why was Saliba not registered in Arsenal's Europa League squad as he stayed at the club? Yeah, Daniel, we know it hasn't been an easy time for William Saliba since joining Arsenal. He went straight back on loan to St Etienne, that was part of the plan, but in his season there, he suffered injuries, the COVID lockdown disrupted things, he had a family tragedy too, and since coming to Arsenal, his adaptation has been much slower than expected. He's not ready for first team selection, it would seem, and that's why they looked into another loan deal. St Etienne was lined up once more, but they couldn't complete the paperwork before the international deadline. A move to the Championship, I was told and reported, was never a likely option and did not come to fruition. So in terms of the Europa League squad, there was no space for him. That's only though for the group stages, and it could change of course in the knockout phase. He was, I believe, included in Arsenal's Premier League squad because of the number of under-21 players you can have, and both Arsenal and Saliba will hope that he can now kick on, make progress, if not a potential loan deal in January, but if it goes to plan, he can be part of things in the domestic competitions and also in Europe if Arsenal get to the latter stages. Here's one from Will. Any news on the possible removal of pay-per-view? A contentious issue indeed, Will, and one that the Premier League have been quite clear about, in that the pay-per-view matches are set in stone until the end of October and then it will be reviewed. It will need to be reviewed by the Premier League shareholders, the 20 clubs, so they'll need to call a meeting. I don't think we have a date for that yet, and at that meeting I'm sure it will be high on the agenda. Whether it will continue may depend on the return of fans to stadiums. There's no sign of that at the moment. And it may also depend on the viewing figures, which we don't know anything about at this point. So the removal of pay-per-view is not something that I've heard is on the agenda at this point in time. Kevin asks, is the Premier League still going to have a winter break like it did last season, considering the late start to this season? Kevin, that news was announced I think in October that the winter break will have to be scrapped. There are too many matches that need to be squeezed in before the end of this truncated season with the European Championships at the end of it. So I'm afraid whether the players, the fans, the clubs like it or not, they're going to have to play through right until the end with no winter break this year, and they'll hope that it can be restored the following season. Hi everybody, thanks for watching. Subscribe to this channel to get the latest from this show, Ask Ornstein, as well as other videos and podcasts from Tifo and The Athletic. Make sure you check out the Ornstein and Chapman podcast too, free to listen wherever you get your podcasts and ad-free when you subscribe to The Athletic.